Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going into the Shingle Victorian, another rare style and the youngest of the Victorian homes family, which kind of gives me an idea for a cast challenge. The Shingle Victorian home didn't start as a style until about 1880, while the Victorian home movement started with the Gothic revival back in 1840. Like most Victorians, if not all, this was a style originally beloved by the wealthy. They would build massive rustic, air quotes, cottages as lakeside vacation homes. How massive? How about 60 rooms, kinda massive. Unfortunately, most likely due to upkeep cost of the shingled exterior, coming across original builds is extremely rare. And no, we will not be building a 60-room cottage mansion hybrid today. Other than the rows and rows of shingles, there was very little exterior decoration. The interior layout was most similar to the Queen Anne, which was the first build we did on the Build Like a Nerd series, so if you missed that one, you should totally check it out right after this one. I will be referencing it a lot just because they are so similar, but you don't need to watch it first. For example, the main difference to the Queen Anne is that this one will have significantly larger rooms and a significantly less ornate exterior. Porches will also be in line with the facade of the build as opposed to being sort of tacked on, which I'll explain in more detail when we get to that part of the build. And while occasionally the first floor may incorporate some stone and brick, for the most part these were sided in shingles, hence the name. A lot of plain doors and windows were used, as again air quotes rustic was sort of the direction that the wealthy wanted to take with these. And even though this is a fairly unknown and unpopular style, I think that you'll really enjoy building it, and I hope it sees a little bit of a comeback, at least in the Sims world. I'm starting on a 30 by 30 lot in Brindleton Bay today. That's the world that came with cats and dogs. There isn't any shingle siding in the base game, so you're going to have to either use cats and dogs or get famous. I don't know if there are other packs that have shingle siding or not. So I had to pick between those, and I thought with this being traditionally sort of a lakeside or seaside cottage for the people who can afford 60-room homes, Brindleton Bay seemed like the better option. If you were with us for the Queen Anne Victorian, you're going to recognize this sort of put a whole bunch of rooms together method. I'm going to start with a 4 by 6 room. This is going to be our entry hall. Then starting right up in this corner, we're going to go over 6 and down until we are 2 past the front of our entry room here. And do another 6 wide room on this side that's just 1 tile in. You're going to add a small 4 by 4 sort of study or hallway area here. Another 4 by 6 room here, which we will turn into the breakfast nook. And following the same line across, add our kitchen. While this is definitely on the smaller side of a Shingle Victorian, I still think it deserves a double wide staircase. And then upstairs, once again, we're just going to start with a whole bunch of rectangles. This whole side is going to be the sort of master bedroom and bathroom. And I figure if we add 2 4 by 3 rooms like this, one can be a closet, one can be a bathroom. We're going to add a 2 by 4 room right here. This will all be hallway. I'm going to add a bedroom here. Yes, it is going to go off of the sort of base of the build 2 tiles, but don't worry, it'll make sense. So that will be 4 by 6. I have another 4 by 6 bedroom here, and this one is going to start out 3 by 6. But now that all of our walls are in place, we're actually going to add a couple of bay windows. So we'll add a partial octagon basically here, and then hold control with your wall tool to get rid of the wall. Unlike the Queen Anne, towers and bay windows are still used, but not nearly as frequently, so you can definitely add some to your builds, just remember to keep it in moderation. I'm also going to add one to the front of the dining room here, and add a small half bath on the first floor. I'm going to add one to the end of the breakfast nook as well, I think. And now we can add some decks. We will of course have one coming off the entry, although it'll be quite small. So we're going to take this same deck and we can just copy and place it around the build here. I'm going to wrap it around this corner and just off the kitchen here. Upstairs, I'm going to add a deck here off this bedroom. And if you're building your own and not following along and just trying to get some of the main concepts, here's what I want you to remember about where to place the decks and balconies and all that stuff. They are going to be more in line with the build. Unlike the Queen Anne, where you may have deep porches sort of coming off and wrapping around the sides of the build and sort of adding to the overall facade and shape of the build, you may still have some decks wrap around, but they are going to fit in as if you were trying to square off the sides with the decks and balconies and all that. So that's the main difference there. Roofing is going to be a bit of a wild ride, so buckle up. We are just going to stick with the default pitch. I find that that's a pretty ideal pitch for most Victorians. And we're just going to start by using a hipped roof to cover the majority of our roof, making sure to pull those eaves down. From here, we are going to use an assortment of gable roofs, and just make sure that we pull them in to make seamless, well, seams. This one's going to be a little tricky anytime you have a main roof portion and then another portion sticking out on 2 sides. Like this, it's like a square and then another square. You're going to start focusing on only one of the sides, like this, and then place the roof in the other direction as well. Now to make this look a little bit more clean, I'm going to bring this down to only 1 tile wide and hold shift to pull this eave in, copy and place the same roof piece but pull the lower eaves in, and then pull it back to blend in. If I leave these eaves down, I'm going to get that, which I don't want. And I'm actually going to pull this out to cover this bay window here. You can also use Octagon roof pieces. The main concern with Octagons is that we're still having the bug where the peak of the roof clips in, which is super annoying. So you can use those, or you can stick with gables, or even half gables, which is what I'm going to use to cover this portion over here. Some of the simpler Victorians and or more fancy Victorians that have been simplified with renovations and whatnot over the years will often at the very least square off this roof portion and not use an octagon, and may square off the bay windows as well. So this sort of octagon topped by a rectangle is something that you're going to see a lot. Off the back here again, I can grab another gable, and then decide if I want to use an octagon here or another half-hipped roof. You don't have to cover these balconies and decks, but if you do want to, we can use a half gable, just sort of tucked in there and pitch down a little bit. I'm going to hold shift and extend this eave an additional sort of section and adjust the pitch so that it matches. This deck piece over here is going to need a little bit of TLC to roof properly. Once we get the initial half gable lined up, we're going to have some clipping over here. We don't want that, so what we're going to do is hold shift to push this eave in, but then we have a gap over here. So copy this roof piece, place it in the exact same spot, and you're going to hold shift to push this eave in, and then when you extend it over, you don't have the clipping and you don't have the gap. I'm going to copy this same roof piece to put down here. There we go. And there's the basic shell of the shingle style Victorian done. I think we can go ahead and talk about siding now. If you want, the first floor or some areas of it can be stone or brick, but the majority of your build is going to be covered in shingles. Cats and dogs gives us these three options, and this one comes with Get Famous. It's almost going from like least rustic to most rustic. If you pick a smoother shingle like this, you'll probably go with slightly more ornate doors and windows. If you pick a rougher texture like this, you'll go for much more unfinished, rough-hewn, just plain old wood doors and windows. For the sake of sticking with as few packs as possible, I will just be going with the cats and dogs shingles, and I think I might actually mix and match a little bit. Typically neutrals are the direction you want to go. A lot of these homes started out very, very brown. You can do a very dark brown if you want, however I need to have this show up on thumbnails and stuff like that, so I will be going with a lighter color, but I might add a little blue here and there to lighten and brighten it. That's kind of fun. I expect with the game being free, we are going to see a lot of people trying to come in, join the party, start channels and stuff, and more power to y'all. Like, go for it. It's a great time. It is a lot of work, and I think that's something a lot of people don't always realize when they're going into content creation. It's a lot of fun though. Very rewarding. You will want to stick with shingles for the roof, which I feel like is pretty obvious, but something more rustic can definitely be really nice, and probably something that sort of complements the color of your build a bit. I do want to add some chimneys. I think it'll just add a little bit to the build, so let's do that. Draw some 2-tile rooms on the outside, and I'm going to make this top story tall walls because I don't actually have any rooms up here, and then I can adjust these using half walls to get the actual height chimney I want. And I want a fireplace off the dining room as well. Now the chimneys will not be shingle, those will be stone or brick. I'm going to be using the rustic riverstone because it's my favorite. I'm picking a more simple foundation just because the shingles on top of shingles on top of shingles is so busy. And I think we're good to talk about doors and windows now. And we do have medium wall height walls down here, which if I didn't mention, you can change that now and it shouldn't mess anything up yet. And we want to go for a fairly simple door, something that's actually just wood tone. I really like the cats and dogs doors. I think that those would do really well here. They're a little fancy, but that's okay. We picked some of the fancy shingles, so it balances out. When it comes to windows, we want big windows, but not necessarily floor to ceiling windows. So I'm actually going to be sticking with the short wall height windows. I'm probably going to use a lot of these, although I may use the slightly larger one for the bay windows. I did turn on move objects. If you would like to turn on move objects, just hit Ctrl-Shift-C and type in bb.moveobjects. You should get a confirmation code. I just got mine that it's off, and if it doesn't work, try bb.moveobjects on. And in the end, you should want move objects cheat is on as your final confirmation code. And then you can place windows on shorter walls, which can be really handy. Also, if you want more exact placement, you can hit F5 on your keyboard, and that'll let you sort of raise windows by quarter tiles instead of half tile marks. Super handy. Works for placing everything. Everything will now place on quarter tiles. As far as heavy or light windows go, this build is typically pretty heavy on the windows. Lighter windowed builds could be something like the Spanish Colonial. Heavier windowed builds would be something like the Mid-Century Modern. This is somewhere between medium and heavy on windows. Big rooms, big windows, big money. I always like having nice tall windows on either side of the fireplace. I just think it looks nice. And I'm going to use these same doors throughout the build to allow for access to these decks off of multiple rooms. Placing slightly shorter windows in the kitchen can really help when it comes to cabinet placement, and I find it's just really convenient to copy the same window placement upstairs if the walls allow for it. And there's our windowed shingle. Lots of windows, lots of light, lots of trees getting in the way. All sorts of good stuff. I'm going to be going with the inlaid exterior trim and just picking a nice sort of mid-range brown and placing that on these overhanging parts of the build. Speaking of overhanging, we should probably discuss columns and railing really quickly. Columns aren't going to be too ornate and will most likely be wood. I'm going to use these mega columns because they're thick enough to look like they can support stuff, and there's no way I'm going to be able to match the wood tones anyway. I'm going for a fully supported corner and then framing out sort of the windows, and I can carry the same column upstairs as well. Which makes me think I should go for the jutting exterior trim instead. Yeah, that's better. Going to add some nice wooden stairs over here. And if you want to add a railing, just something super basic. I really want to use more of the cats and dogs stuff, but I know that I will go into the Cape Cod or Dutch colonial style way too fast and too easily if I do that, so I really have to limit myself to the base game here. Adding some stairs to the backyard. Typically you don't want your window frames to be painted any sort of crazy colors, just sticking with something very neutral and more or less unfinished looking is a great direction to go. I'm going to use this same color flooring as I have for the steps just to sort of carry that through. And here's a fun thing. If you want to make a nice tidy corner on your decks, you can change the direction of your flooring by pressing the comma and period keys and hit Ctrl F to place quarter tiles, and you'll get a seam, which is just nice. I'm going to use the same wooden floor inside, as well as use the same fence to make a bit of a safety rail around my staircase. And I think this is the matching railing. As long as we're laying floors, let's talk about doors for inside and paint and stuff like that. And I'll put down lights because y'all seem to appreciate that. Can't imagine why. Once again, doors, room to room, you can keep wood and simple, like this guy. Some of these almost French doors. The mega double doors are a great option as well, or you can just open the space up and stick with archways. Cats and Dogs does come with this cute little rustic door. It's a little bit too barn-like for our build today, so I'm going to be going with something with some panels for bathrooms and bedrooms. Fireplaces don't have to be anything special, and if you want a little bit more space, you can always pull the fireplace directly into the chimney. I'm going to be adding the same fireplaces upstairs as well. Whoops. There we go. Fireplaces upstairs isn't something I typically remember to do. Also, I just realized I put medium wall doors on short walls, which isn't going to work. And this is why it's dangerous to turn on move objects, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to switch them out for these more simple doors. Problem solved. As far as inside walls go, honestly, I'm guessing a bit with this one because I didn't find any good information on it, which is, I guess, the chance that you take when you're building something that people don't care about. Like, I searched Shingle Victorian in the gallery, and these are what came up. So if you think I'm exaggerating, if everybody who watched this video literally went and downloaded this build, we could probably have it be the most popular Shingle Victorian on the gallery pretty quickly. This one's actually really cute. I like this one. Anyway, so I am guessing about the inside walls a little bit, but from what I know about the era, we're probably going to be looking at a decent amount of paneling, possibly a paneling wallpaper sort of combo like this, and definitely darker wood tones, more simple neutral colors, maybe paneling on paneling. I actually like that for these rooms. I don't know that I've ever used this wallpaper. Let's see if we can't come up with a good kitchen layout real quick. If I scooch this door, scratch that. If I just use a smaller door, I can actually end up with a pretty spacious kitchen here. If it was a little bit bigger, I could add an island, but that's going to cramp it up a bit too much. As usual with Victorians, you want to keep your kitchen toward the back, and since this is such a spacious style as far as building goes, having a separate breakfast or casual dining room as well as a more formal dining room, definitely appropriate. Half baths like this are super easy to throw down. You just put a toilet in one side and a sink on the other, maybe a mirror if you're feeling nice, and it's a bathroom. For the bathroom, space is upstairs. For something big like this, a double vanity or at the very least a larger counter space is super helpful, and you can still fit in a shower and a tub. And then for sort of the kids' bathroom, we'll do a shower tub combo, toilet, sink, a little mirror which we can raise by pressing Ctrl and 9. Some of you may be able to do it by just pressing 9. I don't remember why, but for some reason I can't, and I just haven't bothered to fix it. I want to scoot my build back a bit on this lot. I'm going to finish up the chimneys and then we can talk about landscaping. I like topping my chimneys with a half wall, and I want it to be like just above where the roof peak is. You'll have to delete the ceiling, and then you can place a chimney inside. If it doesn't place right where you want it, if you have move objects on, you can use the 9 key or Control 9 to raise it up. Make sure you actually line it up though. And now I think we're good to talk about landscaping. We're not going to go into crazy in-depth flower beds or anything like that, but a small, organized flower bed, maybe some ornamental trees, a nice walkway. It's about all you're going to need. Cats and Dogs comes with white birch tree, and the base game comes with quaking aspen tree, which is quite similar. So you can actually mix and match these together a little bit, so you don't just have the exact same tree all over the place. And let's add a flower bed around this side. If you have a space that you specifically want to put plants in, it can be really helpful to sort of paint it in first with some terrain paint, and then go through and add your plants. We'll want something a little taller closer to the house, and placing things in odd numbers can help feel more organic. Placing things in even numbers is going to feel a little bit more designed. I think these hostas are super pretty, so I'm going to use some of those as well. Not only do these scale up and down really nicely, but there are tons of swatches. Rocks are pretty much a must-have for me at this point, and if there's a specific rock color that correlates to the world, go with that one. You can add some nice sort of garden decorations as well. I forget about gnomes all the time, but maybe this would be a good gnome build. You could bring in some color with flowers, and if I ever have some big patches of dirt like this, I like to use the low-lying pale yellow flowers or some of the daisies, possibly even wildflowers to fill in some of those gaps. I'm going to add a path, and I'm going to start by laying down some dirt, and I'll go through and add my stones or gravel or whatever else I might want to use. Because this isn't a very nice gradient in, I'm going to use a very soft eraser to sort of make it fade out at the end here. And use the same terrain paint I used under the landscaping for under the foundation of my build, under any other landscaping or structures, and at the base of some of my other stairs to help them look used. There's my shingle. Let's do a recap. The shingle style Victorian is the youngest of all the Victorians, and the older sibling, more or less, that it chose to draw from most is the Queen Anne. It still has that very boxy room structure where rooms flow one into another without using hallways, but it is much more simple, does not really use any external decoration, and typically has shingled sides, hence the name. Windows will be fairly simple and quite large, finished in a very neutral tone or sort of an unfinished color. Here's a closer look at that floor plan where you have rooms flowing all one into another as opposed to having separate hallways, with the exception kind of being any bedroom spaces. The easy thing about Queen Anne's, shingles, and anything else where these rooms sort of flow one into the other is if you want to add on, you literally just throw on another room off of whatever room would make the most sense. So if you wanted to add a game room, perhaps you would add it off of the living room. If you wanted to add a quiet study, perhaps add that off the dining room, and so on. Just match up your siding and windows, add a new roof, and you're good to go. All of the builds in this series will be available on the gallery as their style name and shell. Not all the Victorians have Victorian in the name because it's a really long word, and my gallery ID is sahmandbean. If you like any of these builds, they all have tutorials, so you could check them out. The good news is I even put them all in a playlist for you, so you can check that out using this card here, or you can watch a video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. I appreciate you guys building with me today. I look forward to building with you again tomorrow. If you haven't already, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like this video if you're enjoying it. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!